but now we're using it, and they're actually taking the cost of that and deducting it from our monthly costs, so they split the cost of the infrastructure. It was an incentive, it was part of their sponsorship. That's at least $250,000, folks. So that's huge, huge savings for us. So great, great partners, by the way. So we upgraded both of our firewalls, all of our core switches, our data center switches. We added 500 VoIP phones. We're going from a traditional PBX to voice over IP. We added over 1,300 power over Ethernet ports around campus. We added at least 25 digital signs. I don't know if you guys know the Cisco UCS. It's kind of their unified communications platform and systems platform. We basically got one of those in each of our data centers, and we used it to run all the software, DNS, network services. We used their new ICE product for the credentialing, authentication, so we've since rolled all those out. So you kind of get an idea. We were able to increase our overall campus virtualization in our data center from 60 to 75%. So we're doing really well. So we've been able to do some pretty cool stuff. And as an aside, all the student printing, which we're trying to move to the cloud, but in the meantime, all the printers that we bought to handle, because we had to have printers in each campaign office and the CPD office, for the media filing center, all these things. It's not the most expensive part, but it all adds up. So we basically just bought those knowing the time we needed for student printing and then just rolled them out.
So with all the Cisco gear, did they pony up as sponsors for some of this?
Cisco was an amazing partner. I can't tell you what their discount was because we've been sworn to secrecy. Let's just say it was quite impressive. Quite impressive. Yeah. So yeah, they were good, and they know that we're a valued partner, and we're a Cisco shop almost top to bottom. So, and our team trusts them. They had CenturyLink had a dozen people on site the day of the debate. Cisco had 5. Okay, so project managers, technical folks. They were committed to making sure that this was. There's no way we could have done that. We have great network people. We do. Just not enough, right? So they were part of our team for 3 months. Yeah. So another thing we did was, because of our kind of interesting mix of sports at DU, we do get quite a bit of exposure, especially men's hockey, lacrosse, basketball is growing, but we needed to make some investments here, so we have to connect to Root Sports, CBS Sports, things like that on a regular basis. We once we talked with the media, we knew kind of what they needed on a regular basis to interconnect. So now we have those permanently in place. So that's something we will reuse that capability. The questions come up: would we host again? I said, give us some time, but perhaps we'll be much better prepared because the infrastructure's there. So some of the major tactics that we actually put in place, and we've kind of talked about some of these. Obviously, we wanted to bring the best partners in, people that had done this before. So it turns out CenturyLink hosted and prepared and planned for, with Cisco as their partner, for the, I guess it was the Democratic National Convention, which would have been in 2008, I think. Yeah. So they had done this before. In fact, they had all their cows, their central office on wheels. They had all these already built. They could just back them up, interconnect and go. So that really helped. Don't reinvent the wheel. The media knows what they want. They know what they need. Just listen. So a lot of it was about the business requirements analysis. We were talking about that a little earlier. I know that you guys do that a lot with the projects you do. A lot of us listening. Don't try to tell them. One of the challenges we had was what the CPD told us we had to do, what the media said they wanted. There was oftentimes a great deal of difference. So we spent a lot of time working through that scope. Okay.
Which one was more extensive, or were they just different?
Oh, the CPD started very nebulous, but then they would give us more iterations because it changes. The technology changes in 4 years tremendously, right? Mm-hmm. So the problem they had was the specifications they gave us were really from 2000. From the last was 2008, right? Or I guess it was actually held in. Yeah, that's right. And a lot of it was outdated. In fact, there was nothing in there about voice over IP. It was all analog. Okay, so I'm like, so, and what the CPD is comfortable with and what the media wants is sometimes different. So sometimes there was a negotiation that kind of went into place around that.
Was this the first, second, or third debate?
We were batting lead off. So interestingly enough, that you asked that question, the CIO for some of the other institutions, Center College, Hofstra, and, who was the other one? I can't remember the other one, I apologize. We actually got together and talked.
Okay.
And then we actually
I was curious.
planned, so basically they came and visited us, we visited them prior, so we kind of shared. That was really helpful, because there was some, and this is where we learned, the CPD was telling us no voice over IP. We went and visited Center College, they said, oh yeah, we're doing it all on voice over IP. I'm like, what? So I went back to our contact, the technical contact with the CPD, and said, tell me what's going on here, why the difference? He says they're building a new phone switch from scratch, and they're doing all Cisco voice over IP. So it was a little different, but we decided to kind of do more of a hybrid approach, if you will. So, yeah, that was helpful though. It was very, very helpful. When I got to DU a couple of years ago, they did not really have a project office. They were doing project management, but it really wasn't a formalized process. I said, okay, perfect timing. Okay, so we decided to build a PMO. So literally what we decided to do was to really just follow the basic PMBOK just as a start. So we were focused on scope, cost, schedule, things like that, budget, right? So what I just explained to them was, okay, this one can't move. Schedule doesn't move. Okay, now phases and deadlines up until that point, you can obviously shift as resource changes and things like that and manage that. But the launch, if you will, could not change. So I think the team understood that. We knew we had to design for some flexibility up front. One of the challenges with the media is they all use different things. And it can be anywhere from, they literally ask for an ISDN circuit. Okay, now you would think, wow, we're way past that now here in 2013. No. So what we had to do is we had to build an infrastructure, a fiber optic infrastructure between us and CenturyLink that would allow CenturyLink on the fly demand to provide any type of channelized circuit anywhere in the facility. So we laid way more copper and fiber than we possibly ever needed, but you just don't know where they're gonna need it. And it wasn't just indoor. We had to have 80 media stands outside, because this is where the media stand up and, you know, there's DU in the background and they're doing their little, you know, their 8 o'clock news or their 5 o'clock news shot, right? So we had to have the same infrastructure outside as we did inside. That was probably a little more challenging.
So it just wasn't an outdated requirement on paper, the actual equipment that they were using required
Right.
ISDN.
Yeah, but I'm gonna show you some. Some of it was very leading edge and some was kind of trailing edge. A lot of it kind of depended. So, I mean, we had like 12 media from, what is it, Algiers? I mean, they were from all over the world.
Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera, that's it, thank you. I mean, they were from all over the world and all their requirements were different. Typically, you could provision it from some kind of channelized, whether it's a T1, whether it's a T3, or whatever it turned out. Some of them just use the internet. Some of them that were a little more, you know, future thinking. I mean, literally, they were just using the internet, which worked great, so. Assume that the scope is gonna move. So I just told the team, don't lock yourself in. So they're saying, well, how much? Like, you know, for the Media Filing Center, which is where all the media sat and did their story prior to, and then they wrote their story afterward. This is not in the debate hall, but it's adjacent to it. You know, they told us up front that we were gonna need to have, support 650 members of the media. 650 at tables and sitting down. We ended up with 800, a little over 800. So, you know, contingency planning, I know sometimes, so, you know, usually this takes about 2 weeks to get this kind of task done, right? Using our agile, we figure about 2 weeks, you know, and then you're always thinking, well, maybe we need to add a day. You know, that's a huge percentage difference between 600 and 800. So I just told the team, I said, copper's cheap, cable's cheap, don't worry about it. Make sure we don't miss a beat. So that was kind of part of it. So just understanding that it can change up front. Don't assume that if they say 10 now, it's gonna be 10 at the end kind of thing. And that was hard for folks. I mean, we're in an environment at DU where when somebody asks for 2 phones there, typically it's 2 phones there, maybe sometimes it's 3, so it's different.